Hi, this is Mark Arnold with another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And today I have an author, and he's done a lot of other things, but how I know him is he was the author of this book, which has been very helpful, and we'll find out how it's been helpful for me, called The Wonderful World of Disney Television. He is, the name says here, Bill Cotter. How are you?
Doing great, thanks.
Thank you. And where do you reside?
I'm in the suburb of the Los Angeles area, the San
Okay.
Fernando Valley. So I'm a whopping 17.5 miles from the Disney studios.
Okay. Now, in doing a little research, because I knew you did this book, but you've done a few other things. You actually worked for Walt Disney Productions for a time. What did you do there?
I had a great job. I set up all the company's computer security. I had been working at Cape Kennedy, and I went over on a day off to Disney World and applied for a job there, thinking I was going to get the program audio animatronic bears or monorail systems. And they looked at my security background for the work I was doing for the government and asked if I would set up the computer security. So I had a great job. I'd work a month at the studio and then a month at Disneyland, a month at Disney World, then over to WED, back to the studio, that sort of thing. So I did that for most of the time. I was with Disney full time 6 years, and near the end of it, I had worked my way into doing some computer stuff over at Imagineering on some of the thrill rides and leading into Epcot.
Hmm.
So it was great fun. It was great to be on an expense report and sent to Disney World.
Now, did you train for this as a career? I mean, I don't mean Disney, but I mean doing computer security and things like that.
Well, yes and no. My degree is in electrical and computer engineering, but if you did a Google search on me way back when I was in my college days, I actually got arrested for being a phone freak. And
Ooh.
I figured out a way to make free telephone calls, which was a great way to make the New York Times, but it wasn't, my parents weren't so happy about it. So I had been looking for various jobs, and the U.S. Navy came along and said, "Hey, we'd like somebody that could if you crack the phone company, how would you like to crack the fail-safe system on the submarines?" So I got hired to be a computer designer on the Polaris, Poseidon, Trident nuclear submarines and work on that. And as I said, we were over at Cape Kennedy having a unplanned day off. Our new missile was so much bigger than the last one. They were concerned if it blew up, would it take out the blockhouse? That they said everybody take the day off. Everybody else played golf. They went over to take advantage of the Disney golf courses. And I went over and I walked in. It was like visiting the World's Fair, which I had gone to a lot, the 64 Fair, because there was monorails and Mr. Lincoln and a Carousel of Progress and all that. So I went out, bought a tie, went into the casting building. I asked for a job and they said, yeah. And then they called up and said, change their mind. It's going to be in California. After I've already quit my job, told my girlfriend, got rid of my apartment. So I flew out to California and I was out here about 2 weeks and I said, oh, we need you back in Florida on a big fraud case. Back to Florida. So I did a lot of miles over the years,
Hmm.
but it was great. It was a wonderful time. I started with Disney in 1976,
Hmm.
and it was a wonderful time because there were still an awful lot of the Walt era people still there. When I got the job and they moved me to California, my boss was still in Florida. So I said to him, what do I do till you get here? Because I didn't know anything about Disney. I mean, I literally was just dropped in California. And he said, go around, just get to know people. So I'd walk into an office and say, hi, what do you do? And the guy said, oh, I'm an animator. And I said, how do you do that? And he would tell me, and I said, oh, what's your name? Oh, Frank Thomas, Ollie
Yeah,
Johnson, Ward Kimball, the big boys,
right. Because they're still there, yeah.
yeah, they were still there. And I could walk into the machine shop and talk to the guys that had, designed Walt's miniature train.
Mhm.
Or on another day, the projector systems were Circle Vision, Circorama, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So it was really a great time to be there while there was still people connected to the glory days.
Mhm. So I think you just said that you worked both at Disneyland and Walt Disney World, then
Yeah, I would
off and
rotate. So
on. Yeah.
I would spend like basically, it depended on the project. I might be at the studio a month looking at the computer security, the payroll
Mhm.
system, or the physical security of the data center. Then I would be off to WED to work on the ride system for Space Mountain. Then I would be
Mhm.
down in Florida to go do something else, fraud in the hotel. I was moving over all over the place. That was nice. And then I did that for 6 years, but then Warner Brothers came by and said, we'd like you to do the same thing for Warner Brothers. And how would a 42% raise sound? So I said, it sounds
Wow.
good, particularly because my girlfriend, now my wife, was at Disney and she still had a silver pass. So I didn't lose the, some of the perks, but I made a lot more money.
Hmm. How long were you at Warner Brothers then?
15 years.
Oh, okay. So
And then I
let's
did
see.
some time at Universal after that. And then I got out of the entertainment business. And when I retired, I was a senior vice president at Bank of America. And I had about 18,000 computer servers I was responsible for.
Wow.
That kept me busy.
Going back to Disney, just curious because you left in '82, but did you work at setting up Epcot in the first place or no?
Yeah, I
Okay.
worked on Epcot,
Yeah.
and it was really funny. I would work on a project, and then they would kill it for budget or schedule or whatever. So it got to be where I'd go to a meeting and I go, "Oh God, don't put him on my project," but it's going to get killed. But yeah,
Uh,
worked on that. I actually left Disney right before, about a week before the opening of Epcot, but
mhm.
I still went down. I said, well, I told Warner Brothers, you got to wait. I got to go to this. I put the last couple of years of my life into it. So I went down there for the opening of Epcot and then came back straight thing over to work for Bugs Bunny.
Got it. And I know it was a different company, but and it was like a year later, but did you work on any of the Tokyo Disneyland setup or anything like that or no?
Yeah, it was actually interesting. I was Tokyo Disneyland was underway before I left Disney. We had
Yeah.
been working on it for quite a while, and it was funny how things happen at times. We were in a meeting one day, and people were talking about how we had a real problem with Pirates of the Caribbean, that the Japanese wouldn't allow weapons to come into the country, even if they were fake pirate guns. They have a total ban
Wow.
on weapons.
Hmm.
Then they said also they were having a problem. They didn't want us for our auto animatronic figures to use American-made uh, glass eyes because we use industrial, I mean, medical quality eyes in the figures. They wanted us to use Japanese ones. Well, the Japanese ones are on a metric system. We were in inches. There was a
Oh
whole bunch.
no.
We didn't want to send eyeless pirates over there. So I was in a meeting and they asked, does anybody happen to know anybody at the Commerce Department that might be able to help us on this? And I said, well, I do know a guy at the Justice Department that is actually asking if we could do a favor for Commerce. So let me call them. To make a long story short, we had a whole government contingent came out. We took them to Imagineering, which was strictly off the record. Told them cameras stay on the bus. We took them in, let them tour around. Then I took them down to Disneyland, took 100 people to lunch at Club 33, gave them all a goodie bag with mouse ears with their names on it, stuff for their kids. And about 6 weeks later, I got the call to come up to Don Tatum, the president of the company, or chairman, I guess, at the time. And he said, "This you the guy who was working on the eyeballs?" And I said, "Oh God, yeah." And he holds up a thing, goes, "We got our approval, thanks."
Oh,
So
okay.
so, you don't expect that you're going to have anything to do with some things, and you can just be in an arbitrary meeting and somebody asks something, and next thing you know, you're out whining and dining the government trying to get your favor done.
Hmm.
So, not computer stuff, but still fun.
Hmm. Did you have any similar experiences? You mentioned Warner's and Universal, since they have attractions, or were you more behind the scenes for other things?
Well, what I did mostly at Warner Brothers at the time when I first got there, we did business around the world showing our movies, and we
Hmm.
had the division that would do the TV shows, movies, that sort of thing. So my first thing was I had 21 different countries around the world that each had their own computer system doing things differently, and my task was to put all 21 of them on the same computer system to make it easier to maintain. So I had a staff in London, a staff in Tokyo, and then I had as time went on, I also picked up because I brought into the company PCs and Macs, so I was responsible for all the desktop environment, basically everything at Warner's other than our main IBM mainframe.
Hmm.
So I did that. Then home video came along. We got into the home video business.
Hmm.
Then they said, "Hey, Bill, how would you like to be the guy in charge of computers for DC Comics?" Which turned out to be really good because I got to meet again a whole bunch of my comic book heroes but I
Hmm.
also got a free box every month of all the DC comics. So
Cool.
that was a wonderful perk because I'm a comic book collector. So it was
Me too.
wonderful. And to be able to go into the vault and say, "Oh, here's action number one," and and hold some of these things in your hand was great fun.
Wow.
So then we got into theme parks. Hired a guy named C.V. Wood, who had been an early builder at Disneyland and Freedomland, and we were doing theme parks in Australia, Germany, a bunch of other places. And
Mhm.
then, yeah, 15 years just it went by like lightning.
And in any of these cases, no matter which job it was, did you, I mean, this sounds like a silly question, but I'll ask it this way. Did you know what you were doing? Meaning, was there times where you had to come up with something that really hadn't been done before at each company?
Oh yeah, I mean that definitely comes up. I mean,
Yeah.
for example, going back, to the stuff of the Navy, you're told, okay, here's a computer system, hack it, and you
Yep.
have to start thinking out. There's no manual to say here is how you hack a computer system, and you would have to try to find a way into it. And sometimes you would know how a certain computer worked, and you would try to find holes in the computer. And other times you would do what we call social engineering. You would
Mhm.
try to talk somebody into giving you information that they shouldn't have given you,
Mhm.
and then use that to your advantage. So you
Mhm.
definitely have to play along. But at Warner Brothers, for example, I was in a meeting. We were going to take a really crappy computer system that was on a computer we had borrowed from a record company, and they wanted to put it on our mainframe. And everybody was, saying, "Well, that's a stupid idea." And I put up my hand in a meeting and said, "I think we ought to do it this way. To write a new computer system for the new computer rather than just translate the old crap and that sort of thing."
Yeah.
So a year later, people are asking, well, you've only been here a year. How'd you make vice president? And I'm still here. I said, well, I put up my hand. And I suggested
Ooh.
we try. And I've always enjoyed trying to figure out what isn't working and how do we make it work. So
Mhm.
for a number of years, I was an independent consultant. When I left Warner's, I went into independent consulting. And I enjoyed that because I one day I'd be at a HMO trying to figure out a problem with their billing system. That I'd be at a law firm trying to figure out something else. And then that's how I ended up at Universal. I went to Universal theoretically for 6 weeks to fix something, and I ended up being there 2.5 years. So I've always enjoyed that about the career, the ability to just get thrown in off the deep end and
Yeah.
try to your way to the top.
Yeah.
And there were a number of times I got told, like at Bank of America, that one time somebody screwed something up big time royally. And they said, okay, as of tonight, you're running his department. And I said, well, what do they do? And they said, well, you have about an hour to find out.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I love the challenge. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that part of it.
Well, what prompted that question, because it wasn't on my list of questions, it was just when you're talking about getting all those different computer systems at Warner Brothers all running together, it's like there's no real book on that. You just have to kind of figure out how each one works and how you can interface them all somehow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you're lucky you run into good people. We had a guy at Warner's named Tim Sarnoff. He was the great grandson, I think, of General, excuse me, General Sarnoff of RCA fame. And we were doing a whole bunch of things like the Tiny Toon Adventures and things like that. And we were looking on a way that we could computerize some of it so that if you have a lab scene of a mad doctor and the character runs across it, well, 22 episodes later, do you really need to have a background painter to do the same lab scene if
Mhm.
you use the digital asset and come back and do it?
Mhm.
So I got to learn an awful lot about that aspect of it. And we did some things that were fun. If you remember the TV show, The Adventures of Lois and Clark,
Mhm.
and we brought in a computer system to do stuff what they call pretty easy today, wire removal, where Superman would be carrying
Oh yeah.
Lois and got the wires. Well, we could digitally take out the wires, but we would do things that now are so commonplace that back then people couldn't figure it out. Like we had one thing where he flies in through the window of the Daily Planet with Lois and puts her down, and nobody could figure out how we flew through the window, because of the wires. Well, the top of the window never existed. We just digitally put it in. And today it's real easy, but going
Right.
back to the 1980s or 90s, whenever we did it, he comes in, a window that's shaped like that. We just put the top on it. We
Uh-huh.
also were able to take like a 3-story back lot and make it a 7-story back lot. And we had this
Mhm.
one guy that came from Korea. He was a really super animator. He would put all of us in the windows looking out as Superman flew by, fun stuff like that.
Details. Yeah.
And then they were looking to do the movie Free Willy too. If you remember,
Mm,
that was a Free Willy was a killer whale kept in
right.
captivity, and he gets out to the sea. Well, they wanted to do a Free Willy too, but nobody wanted to get the whale sick or hurt or die or anything. So we mocked up. We had the one of the reservoirs here in LA, and had the water looking like the lake behind me in this picture. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, Willie would come out and jump, and he kept doing it. And then we can say, okay, if it's nighttime, click, 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 and this thing would change. Okay, now if there storm comes up and the wind comes up and the waves are going and the waves, and it's now the speedboat comes out, and we were able to put together about a little 3-minute video that convinced the powers that be that this was worth spending millions and millions of dollars on computers to go start doing, computer animation of whales.
Well, yeah.
Great fun. Like I said, the nice thing for me, I was often at the very right spot at the very right time.
Yeah.
If I had not walked into Disney the day that I did, I'd probably still be trying to blow up things for the Navy. When I was at Disney, somebody at Warner's made a big ass mistake, and Warner's had already called me. I had already turned them down for something else, and then they called and said, "We really need you. Could you
Yeah.
fix this?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." And, oh, the money, that sounds really fun. So again, if the other guy at Warner's had done a really good job, there wouldn't have been that opening for me. And over time, that sort of thing, PCs were there. All the guys in our computer department basically hated PCs. I
Mhm.
loved it. Bought a TRS 80 and Apple II and all that. So I was just right spot at the right time. I,
Yeah.
I I probably could not get any of my old jobs back today. It was a feature of the times.
Yeah. So you sound like my dad. My dad's still around, and he was in Silicon Valley, doing everything, working at all the different high tech firms there. And he was more into sales, but he has an engineering background. So, he had very similar stories to you. I was there when Atari started. I was there when this started, and all that stuff. Like you were at Disney, it just popped in my head as far as being at the forefront of like movie technology when they made Tron, and things like that. And
Well, Tron was a really interesting one. I went over to the stage watching them doing Tron, and they had the
mhm,
white costumes with the Mylar strips and all that. And
right.
I happened to mention to one of the guys that I was a computer, guy in real life, and they were like, "Oh, we've never seen one of you in the wild." So they this was no joke. They came over to my office to see what a computer geek's office looked like, and they had the thought of filming in my office until my boss said, "No way in hell, it's not going to happen." So they took all these pictures of my office, and in the scene where Jeff Bridges gets digitized and everything,
Yeah.
basically I'm looking at my office with this giant matte painting and everything else behind it. But they had come over to duplicate my office on a soundstage so they could
Wow.
have guys sit in a real computer geek's office. So
Did you get
yeah,
any credit for that, or are you just revealing that
so
now? So, okay.
one thing I learned over time, learned the hard way is if you don't ask for the credit up front, you don't get it. Like I worked on the movie Tomorrowland,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I did an awful lot on that, but I didn't get a credit for it
Oh,
because basically I didn't negotiate quite right. What happened? This happened to me a couple of times. The movie Iron Man 2, they go to a theme park, Stark Expo.
right.
I had agreed to consult on how do you design a theme park and what would a theme park designer's office look like. And we took the 64 World's Fair and said, okay, visually we'll move this pavilion over here. And I was supposed to get credit on that. And then they called up and said, well, we have a problem. The Art Directors Guild says you're not a member. They don't want to give you a credit. I said, but you guaranteed me you're going to give me a credit. And they said, well, how about if we pay you double? And I said,
Mm,
works for me. So yeah, I got 2 kids in college. The money was more important.
yeah.
So on Tomorrowland, that was a long story how that one came up, but same sort of thing. I didn't get a screen credit, which frankly annoyed me. I should have asked or I should have insisted it. But
Mhm.
when the art director was interviewed about it, he was saying, oh, matter of fact, both in the LA Times and at a D23 convention, he was saying we didn't know what to do, we didn't know how we are going to create the World's Fair. And then I met the miracle named Bill Cotter. I mean, he
Mhm.
gave me super credit for it. I really appreciated it.
That's
But
cool.
yeah, I've got if you go to IMDb, I've got credit on a bunch of things, but not all the things I should. So,
Yeah.
you know, to me, it's, I just do this stuff as a hobby. I mean, I got out of the computer business, or I retired full time. Oh God, almost 12 years ago now. So
Hmm.
it's all just a hobby to me,
Yeah.
not a career anymore.
Yeah. Now, going way back, it seems like it started off as a hobby like when you were a kid or a teenager, because you have that website that has like Freedom Land and all the World's Fair stuff and everything like that. I assumed you went to some of those things, if not all of those things, maybe not the 39 World's Fair, but the more recent ones, and possibly even Freedom Land.
Oh yeah, Freedom Line I went to a lot. Matter of
Oh,
fact,
okay.
right over here I have a nice reel of film I'm digitizing from Freedom Land. Yeah, I went to the Freedom Land oh, probably a dozen times, something like that. It was in the Bronx. We were living
Hmm.
on Long Island, so it wasn't the easiest place to get to, but went there and enjoyed that. But I really went to the 64 World's Fair a lot.
Hmm.
That was real easy to get from home. I was 12 years old when it opened, and I had four younger brothers. So my parents didn't want to go a lot because taking all the kids was a real problem. But they basically said I could go as often as I wanted if I found a way to pay for it. And then if I had to take my next brother in age, Jim. And Jim was smart. He realized he didn't have to pay for it because if I didn't pay for him, he couldn't go. So I had to pay for the two of us. It worked out great. But I went to the fair a lot, really enjoyed it, and
Hmm.
it's no exaggeration to say the Disney stuff made a big impact on me.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's when the opportunity came up just a few short years later to go to work for Disney. It was really implanted on my brain. And then to be sitting alongside the same Imagineers that had come up with, the Carousel of Progress. So I got to know, for example, the Sherman brothers. They
Hmm.
were near my house and got to know these people. And again, Disney shouldn't have paid me. I should have been paying them. I was in the right spot.
Yeah.
What had happened at Disney was the way I got into the history part of Disney was we had a great program where you could take home a movie and three cartoons on 16 millimeter, and the
Hmm.
studio would loan you a projector and a screen, and you could watch them. Well, the gating factor was they only had, I think, two projectors at the studio, so you have to sign up. And I
Hmm.
realized if I got my own projector, I could take home as many movies as I wanted. So I literally
Hmm.
started, okay, let me start with Snow White. And, I worked my way, through the whole catalog.
Hmm.
But the one thing we didn't have was a copy of TV shows that you could take home. So
Hmm.
it
Okay.
sounds, antiquated now, but, Zorro
Right.
hadn't been seen in years. Davy Crockett hadn't been seen in
Right.
years. So I came up with being a thinker, I guess, a way to screen some of these things. We formed an employee film club at the studio, and between the studio and Disneyland, and I would screen something like the movie or the TV show A Story of Dogs, which is about the making of Lady and the Tramp. And I
Hmm.
would invite in people that worked on the film, like Jerry Geronimi, who was the director of Lady and the Tramp. Hadn't been back to Disney for years, but he was thrilled to come back. We would screen the show and then have a panel discussion with the people that were invited. So I would go to the archives and I would write notes so I could introduce the show. Story of Dogs aired on this date. It started this, it did that, whatever. But I started spending a lot of time in the archives uh, just so I could do these program notes.
Hmm.
Over time, what I realized was that they were calling me to say, "Hey, Bill, do you remember what show we did this in?" Or Bill, that. So I left Disney and happily left on good terms. And I went over to Warner Brothers, and they kept calling me from Disney. Bill, what's the
Wow.
show with the jetpack around the Matterhorn? Or what was the show where Davy Crockett first did this? So I started thinking maybe there was a book in this, and
Okay.
I sent out proposals to like every publisher around, and they all said no because they didn't want to get involved with the Disney legal department.
Yeah.
I mean, just real challenges there. So I kept plugging it away, and then one day I was at work and my wife called and said, "Disney's on the phone. They want to publish your book." And I said, "Yeah, right." I mean, 3 to 4 days a week, I would go leave my office at Warner Brothers, drive the mile over to Disney, and go to the archives, research everything, get back in the car, and go back to Warner Brothers.
Wow.
And I was there so often, I actually had a reserved parking spot at Disney, and although I was a Warner Brothers vice president, and along the way, I was helping Disney with a whole
Excuse me.
various projects. They had a museum in Chicago that they wanted to, the Museum of Broadcast Communications had closed. They were reopening. Disney was supporting it, and they
Hmm.
wanted 100 best hours of Disney television. So another guy and I picked out what we thought were the 100 best hours. I wrote the catalog for the exhibit, and then Disney flew me, Dave Smith, the archivist, and Fess Parker to Chicago for the weekend to kick the thing off. So I was in heaven. I mean, I'm sitting in a bar knocking down drinks with Fess Parker. My dad had come in. Fess was a pilot. I'm a pilot. We were talking airplanes. And at the
Hmm.
end, I said, "This is so great not to talk about the hat for a change." You know?
So I assume you were, because you did this book, I'll hold it up again, The
Yeah.
Wonderful World of Disney. You were watching it when it debuted in 54 and everything, or at least shortly thereafter.
Shortly
Yeah,
thereafter, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I was born in '52, so I
yeah,
was, I missed the first beginnings of it,
yeah.
but I was really lucky. I was able to basically just about every episode of everything in there to get a copy of it and sit down and watch it. So there's one series, Meet Me at Disneyland, which we can't find any physical copies. But that
Hmm.
had been so totally forgotten that when I discovered it, people said, "What show are you talking about?" It's a live series that was done at Disneyland. The what? So there were a bunch of fun discoveries, and
Yeah,
some. I have a whole appendix that unfortunately did not make the book because of size of all the TV shows they planned to do and how far they got and things that failed projects, canceled projects, that sort of thing. And
yeah.
that was a fun rat hole to go down and see some of their
I
plans.
saw that and I was like, whoa, it's like I wish it actually for me, I wish it was in the book, but I get it, as a book author myself. I will show you your book was a big inspiration for me. I've done two Disney books myself. One is called Frozen and Ice, the story of Walt Disney Productions 66 to 85, which
Uh-huh.
is the time after Walt was when you were working there, after Walt and
Right.
before Eisner. And because that's when I grew up, early 70s is, Wonderful World of Disney. That was when I was watching the show and after, of course. And then more recent book is Stars of Walt Disney Productions. Very helpful to have your book because I haven't seen all those TV shows. Although now, this makes it really easy if you don't know about this, unless you're the one running it. I don't know. There's a YouTube channel that's trying to uh, upload like every Disney TV show.
I just
Yeah,
saw that about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. I don't do that because I still do stuff for Disney and I try to do my best to make sure that I don't have their lawyers come after me.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I do a Disney a channel, WWOD TV on YouTube, but I
mhm,
tend to put like old commercials or the opening credits of forgotten shows or, little
yeah,
bits and pieces of things that run maybe 5, 7 minutes, but not the entire episode.
yeah,
My big hope is that those entire episodes will end up on Disney Plus.
yeah,
So the more they get diluted on going on a YouTube or something, it kind of dilutes some of the value. So I tend
yeah,
not to do that. I mean, I was
yeah,
able to get Disney to put, Zorro out on DVD, for example. That was about a 7 year effort.
hmm,
I've been pushing on some of the stuff for Disney Plus, and some of it shows up. Oh, they finally did Zorro. So keep hoping that more of it will come out.
right. And that was my big push because um, my original goal, is like for Disney, most people probably start with cartoons because that's how they, and then I started getting more and more interest in the live action films, and I had seen most of the live action films that came out late 60s and forward. And then, I once your book came out, I go, wow, there's a whole bunch of shows that I've never seen. And to this day I've never seen because they're just not out there. And it really kind of frustrates me because I did get Disney Plus for a while. I did abandon it because I want the older stuff. I would love to see Gallagher. I've never seen it. If things like that. That's just one that popped in my head. And it's just more Star Wars, more National Geographic, more Marvel stuff, and it's like that's fine, but I want more Disney stuff. And they're very close to the vest about putting anything new, and they say, "Oh, it's low resolution." I don't know, but
No,
you
it's
know,
not real. I mean, most of the stuff was shot on 35 millimeter. They could
yeah,
scan it and do a transfer. It's just what happens is, and I had this all along because I was a consultant on the Disney Channel, and I was there when it started, and I was a consultant for years. But do you remember the Vault Disney programs, the
yeah,
sequence? I was
yep,
one of the guys who, hey, why don't we take some of this and do some of that?
yeah,
So yeah, it was fun to do. And one of the things I was doing was, hey, I don't have a copy of this show. This is when you really need the show, so I could take that.
yeah,
But what happens is you go to these meetings, and I'm 71 now, so I'm an old fart. You go to a meeting, some 20-year-old kid sitting there, 25, 30, whatever, and there's no mileage in for them to take a copy of Gallagher out of the vault and digitize it and stick it on there because anybody could do that. So instead, no, what we need to make is So Raven Part 7, they come up with some new show or whatever.
yeah,
It's very, very hard to convince them. I mean, you mentioned Gallagher. Gallagher is a great series. I mean, it really is. There's a couple episodes where Walt really gets into it, where he dresses up. I forget the exact one, but he goes into a barber shop, and the Mellow Men with Earl Ravenscroft, and they're all singing the song about Gallagher, bringing you the thing, and they're swinging him around the chair, and they're doing all this stuff, and he's really acting it. I mean, it's a great
yeah,
the bit of Walt, and to see this stuff is just great. I I mean I Disney Plus has a bunch of stuff I really like. I love The Mandalorian. I love Loki. Some of the other stuff, but I the vault they need to take that out and put it out there. And to
yeah,
me, I would just be glued to it. I mean,
yeah.
not
And I would be fine if they did what they used to do back in the days, but they used to do it theatrically, where they'd pull something and put it in the vault, and then it would come out 7 years later. So I would be fine. I would subscribe to Disney Plus now if every so often they just pulled things and put another crop of stuff that I hadn't seen before. It doesn't all have to be out there all at the same time, you
Yeah,
know.
every now and then they come up and they put something on. I mean, like they had the Adventures of Spin and Marty and the Hardy Boys.
Yeah,
That was great to see. They've just put out a bunch of the I think about 14 or 16, something like that, old cartoons, beautifully
right.
restored. So there is some nice stuff. And then some of the new programming, like there was one that there's a show called Behind the Attractions
Yeah,
about how the parks was built, and I'm on 5 of those, so that holds a dear spot to my heart. But
yeah.
yeah, you just keep hoping they do more, and hopefully they will. I keep pushing here, pushing there.
Yeah, so that's my vote. But and also, it's funny. This is part of the reason I wrote the Frozen and Ice book because, like I said, I grew up post Walt. I actually was born the day Walt Disney died.
Oh, good.
So, but that doesn't mean anything. I like the Walt stuff, of course, but it's just I grew up in the early '70s, and that's the stuff I saw, and so like uh when all those Disney tins came out, with Leonard Maltin and everything, it was all primarily stuff he grew up with and you grew up with too. So you get your Spin and Marty and your Hardy Boys and this and that and the other. And it's like, I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with the Mouse Factory. But there would never be a Mouse Factory tin, even though I would want one, things like that. Or at
Well, I
least
tell
have
you,
that on Disney Plus.
if Leonard had his way, there'd be a Mouse Factory 10. I mean, what we had to go through on some of those was really tough, and they really blew it with some of them. Like I forget which one they did. Like the first episodes of El Fago Baca and the
Yeah,
first episodes of the Swamp Fox, but they never continued them out.
right.
And again, those are great stories. Some of them, we've been able to get some of the stuff like the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh,
Yeah.
absolutely
So,
wonderful show put out on Blu-ray through the Disney Movie Club,
yep.
and that was, I mean, that I was so glad. That was for years. That was the #1 most requested show,
I
and
bet.
yet Disney wouldn't put it out. And one of the reasons was they had taken the original negative for the 3-part show, and then they cut it into a 2-part show, and they also cut it into a theatrical. And then they had to go and put all the pieces of the original negative back together, which they did a outstanding job in doing it.
Yeah.
But it took literally thousands of letters. Now, during the time, like for your book, which I'm going to have to look it up, it was it was a great time for me to be at Disney, but it wasn't a really great time for Disney. There were so many people that were absolutely frozen by fear. What would Walt do? That they
Yep.
wouldn't make a decision on anything. And they'd
Mhm.
actually, for the television stuff, gotten themselves into a real problem that when the anthology series was doing well, they were getting it renewed for 2 years at a time, which was unheard of, and four
Mhm.
years, 6 years at a time. Well, the problem is if you start making a TV show today, who the hell knows what audiences are going to be wanting to see in 6 years from now, right?
Right.
So they got very complacent. They made all the, I mean, I think they went through the entire animal kingdom, the boy and his dog, the boy and his bear, the boy and the owl, the aardvark, the ocelot, the Wolverine, everything. And the last couple of years of the anthology series, they had some really blah stuff on it, right? And then
Mhm.
luckily Eisner came along, and Eisner could be a love it or hate it sort of guy.
Yeah.
But he started bringing back the Disney Sunday movies, and they would,
Right.
excuse me, make the movie The Brat Patrol or Bride of Boogity, and they started putting some money back into it, and all of
Right.
a sudden the Disney TV thing was exciting again. But when I went there was a fellow named Lou Debney. Lou is a great guy, and his son John Debney is a famous composer now. But Lou was one of Disney's right-hand men, and he worked on, again, look at the credits. He's been there, Zorro, Davy Crockett, Mickey Mouse, and everything.
Right.
And we were walking around the back lot one day, and I was, saying I had some ideas for TV shows. And he said, well, I'll introduce you to the guys, but they'll never do it because if you do it and you get the money, that's less money than they get. So they can take out the same recycled crap and put their name on it and make money on it. So I went over as I think I was 26 years old, real excited, made my presentation. Thank you very much. We're going to do the same recycled crap.
Yeah.
So when finally I had left Disney, I came, it was really funny. I had done the thing, as I mentioned, for the Chicago Museum. And I got a call one day that was coming up for the 40th anniversary of Disney Television, and
Mhm.
the network absolutely hated everything Disney had put in front of them, and come up with another idea. So I said, "Yeah, okay. When do you need it by?" And I said, "Oh, there's no particular rush, but tomorrow."
Mm.
So I sat down and wrote a proposal on a Thursday for an hour-long TV show to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Disney Television. And the next day they called up and said, "Well, we got good news and bad news." And I said, "Oh, okay, give me the bad news." And I said, ABC doesn't want to do an hour on this stuff." I said, "All right, what's the good news?" And they said they want to do 2 hours. And I said, "Oh, wow."
Right.
I said, "Yeah, but they need it written up and delivered by Monday."
Oh,
So
geez.
I spent the whole weekend working on it, and I had said, for example, most of the shows up to then had been, let's go to Tomorrowland to celebrate the anniversary of Disneyland, and here's the Pointer Sisters of the Neutron Dance. So I said, I will not do any shows like that. I will not come up with something where we're going just to the land and then we're introducing today's musical act. So I
Right.
put the proposal, pitched it to ABC, they accepted it, and I ended up working that. I got my first screen credit from on it, archival research, etc. by Bill Cotter. That was fun. So I worked on all sorts of things for Disney, even
Mhm.
though it was Warner Brothers, like I said, TV shows, or
Mm.
I'd get a call, like one night I got a call from Eisner's office. Michael's on stage two. He's hosting a dinner for his college alumni. Somebody asked him what was shot on that stage, and he doesn't know. We can't reach Dave Smith. So I said, well, okay, stage two. And I'm thinking real quick. And, you're thinking, well, you'd like to say something like, oh, that's where they did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, a non-Disney film, and see if he'd repeat it. But I said, no, I want to work in this town. So I came up with a list. And so they would call me with all sorts of crazy questions. Like one day I got a call when they were getting attacked by some Christian League because of cross-dressing that they had done in some movie, and they wanted to go back with an example of non-animated characters dressing in drag over the years in prior Disney films.
Mm.
It was like, okay, the Apple Dumpling Gang rides again. They were dressed as dance hall girls, and then in
Right.
this one, so I get these really crazy requests of trying to think about every movie that a guy put a dress on. What do you need it? Well, we could really use it within an hour.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
well,
So now,
it was. it's all fun, it's all good stuff, and it comes up, and you have to enjoy working under a deadline.
Mhm. There's one episode that you talk about on your website, but it sounds like you worked on a lot of stuff, but I was just going by what was on the website. And I think this is an excellent documentary, is Walt the Man Behind the Myth. I was just curious what your participation was and how
Yeah,
you
that
helped with
was
that.
really interesting. When I wrote the TV book, and it's a fairly good book, as you know. Um, Disney was expecting a 300-page book, and I turned in an 1,100-page book. And we finally compromised on 626, I think it is. And unfortunately, the appendix and the index and some of those things went out. But the book came out, and I got a call from the Disney family that they were doing a CD-ROM biography of Walt, and they wanted to have me write the TV section for it.
Hmm.
So I did, and we had an unveiling at Disneyland in the Lincoln Theater,
Hmm.
which was really interesting. There were about 8 of us in a panel, and then people would discuss, Walt, because the thing was all about Walt as an animator, Walt as a theme park guy, Walt as a family man, that sort of stuff. And Diane Disney Miller was one of the people there, obviously, to discuss, Walt in any aspect.
Right.
And they asked me what my impressions were of Walt. Had I met him? No, I had not. But I talked about, how he reminded me of my Uncle Tom with his train set, and always wanted to show it off every time we visited. And Walt had the best train set of anybody. And I mentioned how I didn't like the boy and his dog story so much, but my father did. And I would watch the shows just because I didn't want to let Uncle Walt down. Well, after that, Diane came up to me that night and said it was one of the nicest things that she had ever heard anybody say about her father. So let's stay in touch. So flash forward, time goes, I get the call, would I like to be part of that show, the Walt, the Man Behind the Myth. And that was a tough one for me. My son had been taken seriously ill, and he was in the hospital. We didn't know he was going to make it. And thank God he did. He's doing great. But I literally had gone about 4 days with 2 hours sleep, per night. And we had just brought him home that day, and they said, "Can you still do your part?" So I went over there, and you talk about an intimidating thing. You're sitting on a stage where you're in the center, and there's lights shining at you, and in the background you just see a set of chairs and silhouettes, and it's the Disney family members all sitting there watching as you're talking about their father, their grandfather, uncle, that sort of stuff. And so that was really of all the things I've done for Disney, that's the thing I still remain most proud of. It was we had, unfortunately 9/11 hit, and all commercial TV went off. And when ABC came back on, the first commercial program they showed was Walt the Man Behind the Myth.
Hmm.
And I was working at Universal that time, and I walked in the next day, and people were like, "You're a computer security guy. What were you doing on TV last night?" I said, "Long story." But yeah, then I worked. Diane then asked if I would do some work on the Disney Family Museum, and my daughter, who's not easily impressed by anything, still tells the story. We drove up to San Francisco, and
Mhm.
Diane came and picked us up at our hotel, took us out to the Presidio to show us the building they had just bought. But my daughter still tells people, Walt Disney's daughter took us out for the day. She bought us lunch.
I really like that museum. I'm from the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and I've gone there a few times. I'm in Oregon now, but anyway.
Well, I think
um,
the museum is great. I would again, I was so lucky to be able to ask to work on that. I've given,
yeah,
I think, 3 different talks, 3 at the museum and a couple virtual ones for them. Great resource. Sorry we lost the both of the Millers, but
right.
just again, right spot, right time.
Hmm. Who kind of is left in the family? I should know this, but I mean, it's like you lost them and also Roy Disney, and and
Well,
so
the
is
Disney
there
family.
anybody with the Disney name that's still kind of behind the scenes at this point?
Yeah, yeah, and you've got Walter Jr. and this is a I don't I'm gonna make sure I don't name all the kids because I'll miss one and then
Yeah,
I'll upset
that's
somebody.
fine.
But their daughter is very, very active in the museum, and there's still a very good Disney connection,
Okay.
between the family and certainly museum, and therefore more of a dotted line over to the company because there's you can imagine that relationship has ups and downs at times.
Right, right. Because you never hear about that too much nowadays. It's always Bob Iger or the guy that was in the interim between Bob Iger's first
Okay,
tenure
yeah.
and stuff like that. Yeah, and and Eisner, of course, and things like that. So you never hear about the Disney family proper. And I know this museum was kind of done separately. I mean, it's connected in this Disney way, but not where it's Walt Disney product or the Walt Disney Company or whatever you want to call it.
And they wanted to
Yeah.
celebrate Walt the man, and that's what we really try to end up, for all the exhibits there and the things worked
Hmm.
on it. I had some good friends like Bruce Gordon was an Imagineer who died way too young. He was very involved in the museum. Paula
Hmm.
Sigmund Lowry, who was one of the Disney archivists, and then left the company and still contributes tremendously to its exhibits and touring shows and stuff. We all wanted to show Walt the real man and not not the myth. Yeah, and again, the Walt Disney Company can do anything it wants today, good, bad, or indifferent. It can't undo any of the wonderful things that Walt did, and the family wanted to focus on him and not the Walt Disney Company.
Hmm. And I thought they did an excellent job with it. So I was surprised because I was saying, can this be interesting?
I
But
think
as you walk
that's
through, it's very, very interesting, and you could spend more than a day there. It's like well, that's why I've gone back many times because there's just so much to see. So
well, and plus they have so many temporary exhibits.
yeah,
We were
that too.
there a couple of years ago. They had a Dolly exhibit, and I mean, if you've ever seen Destino, the
Yeah.
short film, wow, how they thought they were going to put something together. Well, the exhibit they had up there explaining the whole friendship between them and what they were working on was good to see. And then they'll go up there, and the next time will be the Walt Disney, the wartime years, various things. So yeah, every time I go up, I enjoy seeing what the traveling exhibits. Plus, they do rotate things in out of the main museum. I just always keep hoping I go back. They haven't taken out any of my stuff. So
Right. Now you say you're basically retired, but do you still contribute things to the museum or Disneyland or Disney Company or anything?
yeah, I've been very lucky in that regard. A couple years ago, it's about 4 years ago, not something
Mhm.
like that. Well, I've spoken at a couple of the D23 conventions. So a couple of years ago, they were coming up with a thing, Destination uh, Disney about the 64 World's Fair.
Mhm.
So that was right at the time the movie Tomorrowland was coming out, and they had me go down to Florida. I was the opening speaker to introduce people what the World's Fair was and how it influenced Disney. And then I did a panel discussion with Bob Gurr. We sat there, discussed, how the Magic Skyway was done. Another D23 convention, I came and gave a talk about Zorro, that
Mhm.
sort of stuff. I did 5 episodes of the Behind the Attraction show.
Mhm.
Basically, anytime they need something old, I'm more than glad to, come out and do it. So, and then I've been very fortunate. I've been asked to speak at a number of other groups and organizations besides Disney. Well, one thing that was really interesting was I was talking to the Disney archivist when we were working on the Tomorrowland movie,
Mhm.
and we were saying that if it wasn't for the World's Fair, because the opening act of that movie, of course, is set at the 64th Fair. They're saying if it wasn't for the World's Fair, would there even be a Walt Disney Company today? Because besides the audio animatronics and all the technological things, they convinced Walt that there was an East Coast audience for his what he thought of a homespun humor.
Right.
Well, if there hadn't been a Disney World, would there be a Walt Disney Company like it was today? So I put together a presentation for Disney, gave it at the Disney Theater, and it was simulcast out to the other Disney theme parks that explained, how, the Walt Disney, Walt first got interested in World's Fairs back in 1933 Chicago, then 1939 New York, Brussels, and I take them all the way up to modern day and how, you can look at Epcot as a modern day World's Fair. But I
Right.
was able to put that together for them. They had me do that at a couple different presentations. It was really one kick. I gave it at the Disneyland at the Golden Horseshoe Review for the retirees club. And I got it fun. I was up on the stage and I said, "Hey man, look at me. I'm highlighting the horseshoe. And since I can't sing or dance, this is great." But yeah, it's been really gratifying because I've gotten over time things more. There was when I was down at the D23 in Florida, I ran into a guy that's an astrophysicist for NASA, probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And he was on the team that helped repair the Hubble Space Telescope. So we became friends, and he said something about NASA's presence at World's Fairs. And I said, yeah, they were at the 62. Well, they had a little thing at Brussels in 58 because it was just being formed, but they were at the 62, 64. Next
Hmm.
thing, invited to come down and speak at the Goddard Mann's Space Flight Center in Maryland. So a whole room full of rocket scientists. And I said, this is like coming home because I used to be a rocket scientist before I went off into entertainment. So I met some really, really great people over the years. And it's funny, about a month ago, yeah, just about maybe 5, 6 weeks ago, there was a event at Walt's Barn in Griffith Park here in the Los Angeles area.
Hmm.
And I just went out. Becky Klein, the archivist, and Paula Sigmund Lowry were signing books, and I just went out to say hi. And I was standing there watching this guy I know playing a medley of Disney music, and this kid kind of like taps on my arm, and I thought I was blocking his view or something. And he said, "Are you Bill Cotter?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" He goes, "Oh, I've seen you on Disney Plus. How do I become an Imagineer?" And I was just mind boggled. This kid recognized me at all, let alone knew my name.
Hmm.
So I said, well, I applied for Disney and I couldn't get my own job today. And but what you got to do is you got to study, you got to go to school, you got to get a degree, you got to work really hard. And his father was really happy because the kid didn't always like to do homework. And I said, no, you got to be the top of your class. You got to
Right.
for it. And then don't let anybody say no. I said, I had originally sent Disney a letter, saying I'd like to come work for you. And they said, yeah, if you're ever in the area, drop in. So, okay, they didn't say no, they didn't say yes. Hey, I'm there, I'm dropping in. So, it was just a thrill to me to be able to talk to this 12-year-old and try to give him some sort of energy boost or inspiration that it's a very hard field to get into something like Imagineering today, but you can do it if you try, and you got to make yourself stand out from the 150 other people that are also applying for the job. So
Hmm.
that was very gratifying. And like I said, I've met some really great and wonderful people along my ride, and some people that are like I said, going out for a night of drinking with Bess Parker. That's great. So many other things are, people that you wouldn't necessarily know, but they made incredible contributions to the Disney, legacy by inventing this little widget that did that did, I mean,
Yeah.
again, super lucky. I count myself very blessed to have met so many wonderful people and made friends of some of them.
Hmm. Now, before we go, there's a few other subjects. They don't kind of fit in. You've mentioned some of them, so I'll just kind of shoehorn it in here.
Okay.
Um, you have a Zorro page on one of your websites, and let me preface this by saying Camden Spees is an animation historian. He's a younger person. He recommended me getting you on the podcast here, which I thank him and I thank you for doing this. But he had a question. He says, if you get Bill on the show, ask him this. He says, when will we get an updated Zorro episode guide?
Yeah, that's something. That's a good question. Zorro was funny. That was the first chapter I wrote of the book because it was one of my favorite shows
Yeah, I
ever.
figured.
And I think Guy Williams was just absolutely perfect in the part.
Yes.
Gene Sheldon. I mean, everyone. Britt Loman as Monasterio. I mean, every part of it. So I wrote the Disney that chapter, and it was I went to a convention. It was back at the time they were called the National Fantasy Fan Club, and I gave a talk on Zorro, and I told everybody, and again I'm going to date myself. The first chapter is online on a service called CompuServe, and you can download it. And if you like it, please write to Disney and convince them they'd like to see the rest of the book, right? So I did this convention, and a couple months go by, and I get a call from Disney. Okay, we're going to do your book, and they said we have to ask though, do you have a very large family? And I said, no, not overly. Why? I said because we're getting letters to do your book from basically every state in the country, but we started getting them from Bolivia, from the UK, from Chad, from Japan. how did you do it? And I said, well, I put a chapter from my book on the internet and asked people to write to you. And this is no joke. They said, what's the internet?
Ooh.
Well,
Wow.
in addition to what you call it, publishing my book, I made more money on helping set up Disney.com than I made on the book. So
Wow.
I just didn't expect it. So I did do I did the whole set of Zorro, and I did a very small episode description of each one. Because back at the time that I first did it, we were on 300 baud dial-up modems and that sort of stuff. So every picture I made very small, and it kept everything short. Well, over time, I've realized now, you can make it, something in gigabytes, and people download it, fiber or whatever. So I've gone through, and I've got, it won't show up behind me with the virtual background, but the whole wall behind me is binders, like the Disneyland series 1955, 57,
Yeah.
every particular year. And I've got all the the Zorro press kits and a zillion photos and everything. So I did the first 13 episodes and in depth and put production pictures and everything. And I was working like that on Crazy, and then ooh, pretty picture. I'm like, my publisher for my
Squirrel.
World Fair book says, could you do another book on World Fairs? So I said, oh, okay, and then at one point I had three of them going at a time.
Yeah.
So and meanwhile, those books sit behind me getting dust. And I really need to get back to it. Unfortunately, I'm so busy these days. I theoretically retired. I don't know if I've ever been busier. I have to just find, I'm a volunteer for the Los Angeles Police Department.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that 31 years now, but I go on patrol. Like I'll be out tomorrow for 6 hours driving around trying to catch people breaking into houses.
Wow.
So I spend more and more time doing that, and I manage the other volunteers. And yeah, I'm looking at those books and I'm doing it right now. So tell Canvan that's an incentive, and I will
Okay.
get back to. I actually, what I've done is I've mocked out a whole bunch of
Yeah.
the next 13 episodes, but now I've got to go and scan it because I do all the web programming myself. I've got to do all the HTML coding and put everything in there, and it's just I need to get to it. But
Yeah.
the fact that I know somebody's actually looking for it gives me an incentive
Yeah.
to work a little harder on it.
Well, Camden and I were talking one day, and this is separate from you, but you'd probably agree with us. It's like we were just trying to determine what was the best thing that Disney did for TV. And we both determined, and he's a lot younger, he's in his 20s, I'm in my 50s. But Zorro was the best thing Disney ever did for television. And it's like, I think it captures everything. I think it's better than Davy Crockett. I mean, people love Davy Crockett and things like that. I get it. And people love Mickey Mouse Club. I get it. But, I think Zorro he hit the nail on the head and got it just right. It's like, and made a very action-packed adventure show. It could have lasted a little bit longer. I understand the reasons why it didn't, but, at least we got the 2 seasons and some of the movies, that they did after.
Uh, in the 4 1 hour episodes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean Zorro. I just love it. Absolutely think it was wonderful. That's why pushing to get it out on DVD. Leonard and I pushed and
Mm.
pushed and pushed, and finally they said we're going to do it. And I was very happy to be one of the talking heads interviewed on the cans for that.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say that was definitely one of his best. I mentioned the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh. Have you ever
Yeah.
seen that?
Yes. And I
I
do
mean,
have that on Blu-ray too. So
yeah, a great thing. I was a big, huge Patrick McGowan fan. So when
yeah.
I used to go to England every couple of weeks for work, I actually went to the church where they filmed the whole thing, and my poor wife is sitting in the car rocking our daughter to sleep, and I'm inside going, "On the southern coast of England, legend men still tell." I was just geeking in heaven with it.
Yeah.
But and then the thing with Walt is he did so much of it, and there were some shows, like I said, after a while, the Boy and his Aardvark stories wore thin on me. But really neat stuff, and you look at some of it today, also realizing nobody else was doing this before him, and he did the first stereo television show.
Hmm.
I mean, put your AM radio over here and your FM radio over here, and we're going to broadcast and you listen in stereo. I mean, nobody did stuff like that. I mean, he did so many things that were just groundbreaking, and every now and then one of them, like you watch one of them and go, okay,
Yeah.
Roger Maris didn't get every hit when he was getting all his
Yeah.
home runs. Uh, but as a body of work, I don't think anybody else compares to it. I mean, it's just phenomenal. That's why I get so mad it's all sitting in cans.
Right.
Now, I have almost everything they ever did on video, here in the house over the years. So I might be able to help you out with an episode of Gallagher. Uh, but I will definitely help you out with that. But yeah, Zorro was just, it was wow. I mean,
Yeah.
Mike Williams was so good. And again, I've done the presentation at D23, and that was really fun because I got to go and spend the day at the Disney Photo Library and just, they said, whatever you want to use in your presentation. So, and like thousands and thousands and thousands of photos.
Yeah.
So we just sat there going through, what's this one? Where'd this one come from? Fun stuff. So
Yeah.
get them behind the scenes shots and like I talk in one of my the presentation. There's a shot of a small oven on the back lot that in a real Mexican town you would have been baking bread in. It's never seen in an episode. It's never a plot device of anything, but for the amount of authenticity wanted, a real village would have had that oven, and there it is on the back lot. So when I went to Disney, when I mentioned way hours ago when we first started talking, I was walking around. I come walking around the bend, and there's the Zorro set
Yeah.
in front of me. So I had to run up the
Yeah.
stairs, that sort of thing. And it was still there. I mean, the
Yeah.
Quartel was still there. It was just
Yeah.
phenomenal to actually be on the set and walk in and out of the stuff was, it's just great memories.
I feel fortunate that I actually managed to walk on that set like the year before they tore it down.
Oh
So
yeah.
because I had a friend, it was my roommate's uh how is it? Roommate's cousin's mother worked for Disney. Now, I unfortunately don't remember her name, but she was administrative assistant to Frank Wells and I
Mhm.
think Michael Eisner. And this is around 1987, 88. I can't remember the exact year. I have my parking pass somewhere. But yeah, I went in for like just an informational interview. I had no clue if I was ever going to work for Disney or anything. And I was in Northern California at the time too. So it's like, it was just a sneaky way for me to get into Disney just once and look around. And so we went and did the interview, and she says, "Well, we don't have any real positions right now, but keep in touch." And well, I really didn't. My life went different directions, but she says, "You can stay here as long as you want. You have your pass. Don't get into trouble, but you can do whatever you want." So I went over to Disney Archives. I did meet David Smith. I looked at Disney news magazines just to see old stuff, because they were there. So and then I walked around the lot, and everybody's all friendly and everything. And I was wearing a suit, so I looked all professional and everything. And I go, "Oh my God, the sets for Zorro are still here," and I was looking around and, unfortunately it wasn't the day like now with cell phone and everybody has a camera. I didn't have a camera with me, but I was just like, wow, and they're just taking it all in.
Well, that's
Yeah.
one regret I have. When I worked there, it was a very firm rule of no photography.
Yeah.
If you back then you had to have, I think they called it a white card or something, and if you didn't have that, between the union and everything else, you could get in big trouble. So
Yeah. I
so
figured, but I back then we didn't have it on our
no.
person, so it didn't even come, you know, you know,
Oh
I
yeah, no.
didn't,
So now
yeah,
today I go back and I have a zillion pictures of me standing at Mickey Avenue and all the rest of it. But back then, none of us had pictures, that it's just in our memories.
right.
Like
It's funny.
when I got there, they were shooting the movie Pete's Dragon,
Oh yeah.
and they built a whole harbor out in the back lot, dug it with boats and wave machines and everything. And my building was where they had the dressing rooms for the actors, and I got to be friends with Shelley Winters, and she'd come back dressed as Gogan, and with this horrible makeup, and she's taking the makeup off. She's saying, "Pour me a scotch." Okay, have one yourself. Okay. And I'm saying, I'm out in LA 3 weeks and I'm knocking out scotch with Shelley Winters. This is great.
Wow.
Pictures of any of it? No, because
No.
it's the job. But
The memories at least, yeah.
yeah, yeah, the Portel was still there, and there were still very recognizable. That the little pond where they did Lieutenant Robinson Crusoe was still there.
Hmm.
And then they took the Quartel set and changed some of that for two things. The Treasure of Matacumbe movie, they made it New
Oh yeah.
Orleans. And then they also used it for How the West Was Won, a TV series with James Arness.
Hmm.
So that was on one side of the street, it was this, but the Quartel was still over there. Then they tore it down, put up a parking garage.
Right.
It's a shame, but
Yeah. So I'm just glad I got in there before that happened. So
yeah, I'm glad you made
yeah.
it. It was
Yeah.
good fun.
And
In those years, I might have still been walking the right pastures. I was walking this
probably.
on my
When did
book.
your book come out? When did this come out?
97, I think.
97. Okay. Yeah. Because I bought this the second it came out. I said, this is the book I wanted. This,
Disney and I have talked about redoing it because they took so much out of it and cut it
Yeah.
out. They did a wonderful job. I had a
Yeah.
fantastic editor. But now I keep saying, how do if I did the book with just the Walt years and we throw out, the Golden Girls, put a, 2 sentence thing or something. I just got to get my button gear, and
Yeah.
finish
So
this
it
one.
is long out of print, right?
Yeah.
Does it command high price? I didn't even look on eBay and stuff like that.
You
Still
know,
pretty.
uh, Sometimes I'll see it and it will sell for 4.95, and the next week it will sell for 49.95. So
Oh,
it's,
but at least it's obtainable. It's like I always say it like we keep mentioning Zorro. If you didn't get those Zorro sets when they first came out, they're like $400 a pop. Which I wish they put them out again. It's like,
what's
um,
surprising to me is that that book turns up at strange places. The picture behind me is a Boy Scout camp in the Catskill Mountains of New York.
yeah.
And I was just back, I go back to every year, I'm one of on the board of directors and everything. So I was back there 3 weeks ago and I go into the dining hall and I'm talking to people I haven't seen in a year or so. And a guy came up with a copy of the book to have me sign because he knew it was going to be there. I did not expect that in the middle of the Catskills.
Oh, very cool. Just another question about Zorro. This is out of curiosity. So when you did put it on video, originally it was did you have anything to do with it? It was a colorized version that came through the Disney Movie Club,
Right.
and then it came out as the Disney Tins. I mean, did you have anything to do with that colorized version that
No,
not many people like?
I helped get Disney on the Disney Channel.
Okay.
That was one of the things for the swashbuckling stuff. And then we combined it when we did the Disney Legends and Heroes. We would basically have, an hour of Davy Crockett, half an hour of Zorro. Make it a 90-minute block. The colorization was done for Disney Television International. The
Okay.
Zorro had never had as big a following on international television as it had for domestic. So they were convinced that if they could colorize it, they would be able to resell it as a new product. So it was done by the international division, and I thought under the limitations of what you had at the time that they did a fairly good job. And they were lucky that they still had a number of the original Zorro costumes and props that they could go and say, was this jacket red or green, and try to match it up
Mhm.
as much as they could. So it's not perfect. I mean, colorization is a real challenge for anybody that's ever done it. And I've worked on some of it. It can be a real bear. So now when we wanted to put the thing out on video, uh, the Disney powers that be first said, oh, we could put out the colorized version through the Disney Music Club because everybody just wants color. And we said, no, 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 no. We
Mm.
really like to go black and white. And we'd love to have the next week on Zorro and, all the little extras. The trouble was, and we had so much footage. I have footage, for example, of Guy as the master of ceremonies in the Portland, near Portland, Oregon Rose Parade.
Mm.
And I mentioned in the book how he was in a car. He wouldn't be on a horse because the horse they gave him was very temperamental and he didn't want to ride it. So then they put a 5-year-old kid on it, and the horse was okay for the kid. Well, I have all this movie footage, right? We had so much stuff of the Zorro cast at Disneyland at the Hollywood Bowl. Disney said we have no money to digitize it. We have no budget. We can't afford to do it. So there was so much we wanted to put on those DVDs that just, I mean, we're holding, Leonard and I are holding stuff in our hands saying, take it, please. And I go, no, we can't afford it.
Oh,
So
geez.
you just hope if they ever redo it that they, take us up on some of that. I mean, some really great,
Yeah.
fantastic stuff. But the trouble is with Disney, to me, to you, like with your book, if you were able to say, "Hey, I sold 100,000 copies of the book," you'd probably be real happy, right?
Yeah.
To Disney, 100,000 is nothing. You got to sell 5 million of this, 8 million of that.
Right. Right.
So we'd find ourselves pitching things that we know that these tins, we could sell 50,000 of these tins.
Right.
Oh, sorry, 50,000. Very,
Uh,
very frustrating. So you put them out, and I'll tell you how cheap Disney is.
yeah.
To get the tins, I had to buy my own copies. So I
Wow.
worked on them, I put things together, I brought in people, we did all that sort of stuff. We don't have any money to give you a copy. So I bought a copy, and then they heard that I was bitching to people they hadn't given me a copy, so they gave me another copy. And by
Yeah.
that time, we are going for $300 a thing. I gave them to a really super good friend of mine that's,
Yeah.
he's done me a zillion favors. I was glad I was able to give them to him. But, so many of us will tell you, you work for this stuff for Disney, you do it at labor of love.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to get rich on it.
Wow. But do you think Disney would like look at how it sells, or if it even does sell, but how it's marketed on eBay and Amazon and stuff like that, where they are, priced at 300, $400 on most of those tins, the Annette tins up there, Donald Duck Volume 4 is up there, even the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, that's up there. I think it's come down a little bit because it did come out on Blu-ray, but like Zorro, well, there's a candidate for Blu-ray. It's like,
But think of
yeah,
it again. Go back to what I said earlier, the 26-year-old kid that's sitting in a room, that if he puts out Zorro, it's not his mark. But if he can go and convince somebody that he ought to be the executive producer of, The Mandalorian Part 7, I mean, that's the trouble you're working with. The current people there today, and if I was them, I'd probably be doing the same thing. I'd want to have the Bill Cotter show as opposed to the Walt Disney show.
yeah,
That's the trouble. You're working with people that have
yeah,
they want to. You got to be realistic. Most people do not go to a movie studio and stay there for like 15 years, like I did at Warner's. People are here 6 months, they're gone in a month, they're gone, they go.
yeah,
So they're going into Disney and they're trying to sell something, market it, and then move on to go to Warner's. And from Warner's, you bounce here, you go back and back at Disney, back here. So people are always trying to sell
yeah,
a project as opposed to a
yeah.
career sort of thing.
Yeah, I just always think like, I'll use Warner Brothers and you work there. They have their Warner Archive label and they seem to do okay with it, and they acknowledge their past, and I don't know if you know who Jerry Beck is. I
Oh yeah,
assume, yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, and he's always working with the people at Warner Brothers to get them to put Looney Tune collections that have cartoons that haven't been released in that format before and stuff like that, and it's like, I wish Disney would do a similar type thing. Of course, they can put their current stuff, the Star Wars and the Marvel stuff, and blah blah blah. Who wouldn't? But to ignore the past, it's like, yeah, they're kind of acknowledging the past, giving it some lip service because the company is 100 years old this year. But what are they going to do next year? Just not talk about it again? I don't know.
There's also another factor. It all depends on how the original contracts for some things were written.
Yeah.
If you look through my book, for example, you're not going to find a picture of Fess Parker.
Mm,
You're not going to find a picture of the Musketeers. And
mm-hmm.
I discussed this with Fess because, again, Fess and I worked in a number of different projects over the years and appeared at various, conventions and things together. The trouble was the contracts that he signed as Davy Crockett, he got paid pretty little to be Davy Crockett, but he got 7.5%, if that's the number, I think, of the list price of any merchandise item, right? So if I were to put a picture of Fess in the book and going by the original Disney contract, he would get 7.5% of the cover price of the book.
Ooh.
One picture, right? Now
Yeah.
I got a picture of Annette in there, who I knew and got along great and everything. She's going to get something like 6.2%. You start putting together pictures, enough stuff, and for every copy sold, Disney would have lost like $22 in paying things out. So
Mhm.
I talked to Fess and said, could I get a picture of you in the book? And he said, look, I'd really like to do it, but my business manager would go crazy because if I do it for you, somebody else is going to come along, and somebody else is going to come along, and somebody else is going to come along. So I
Yeah.
said, what if I buy you another drink? Okay, fine. But that becomes part of it. The Mouseketeers sued Disney for any use of the Mickey Mouse Club on anything other than broadcast television.
Mm,
They sued about it being on the what you call it, the Mickey on the Disney Channel, They sued about putting it out on videotape, and they had to come up with all sorts of agreements. So now, if you go to take something like Gallagher and you want to put
Yeah.
that up on, the Disney Plus, literally Disney has an entire building, the Roy Disney building, full of lawyers, and they've got to go through every
Oh boy.
character that appears in it and everybody that did anything and to look at their contract and figure out what they can do, how they can do it, and it a lot of times it's not worth the effort. Throw it away. Let's go make something new where we have
Yeah.
rock solid contracts that say for for Earth, the known universe, and any form of communication invented now or maybe invented in the future, you have to sign your life away. In the 50s, they weren't doing that, and the
Yeah.
lawyers are a tremendous problem. And I'm not picking on them; they got to defend Disney,
Yeah.
but sometimes they really defend it to the point of being frustrating.
And I get it. I mean, to the point of I'm not defending him necessarily, but the Peggy Lee thing where she had it in her contract that future forms of I don't know how she had it phrased, but it was something talking about future formats, you know, and it got Lady and the Tramp to be pulled for a while, until they got that situation worked out. So I get it, you know. So
Yeah, it's just the sort of world we live in. You have to protect yourself.
I just want it all.
Don't we
The one
all?
thing that is also kind of weird, and this is just an aside, and then we'll just kind of leave it at this, is I always thought Disney was meticulous about keeping everything. And when we started off talking, you kind of acted like they didn't keep a very good archive of the TV stuff or anything.
Well,
Yeah.
yes and no. What
Okay.
happened on most of the TV stuff, they have a very good archive. Now, what they don't have a lot of stuff is like outtakes, for example, because
Okay.
the film vaults of the studio, if you were at the studio walking around, are very small and they didn't have a lot of room. Now they store stuff in salt mines and all sorts of other things. But at that point in time, they were very finite. So you had a bunch of screen tests for 150 unknown kids trying to be Musketeers. The show was on the air. They just threw the screen test. What do you need them for?
Yeah.
Now, we found the screen test of Tim Considine for The Adventures of Spin and Marty, but he was going for the Marty part in it. And the only way we found that was they did a reel to be sent out to prospective advertisers on Here Comes the Mickey Mouse Club. And we're going to have this exciting serial, The Adventures of Spin and Marty. And they put
Hmm.
in screen tests because they hadn't shot the real serial yet. So that's how his screen test survived. And I was when I gave it to him, he was thrilled. He didn't think he'd ever see that thing again. But so a lot of that stuff was gone. Now, the one series that was missing
Yeah.
was called Meet Me at Disneyland. And that
Right.
was a real one-off thing where basically the concept was Walt would go to Disneyland and he would happen to run into Fred McMurray. Hey, Fred, you're here for the parade? Yeah, I am. And oh, it's been great to see you. I haven't seen you since we finished making the Aftermind of Professor. Oh, yeah, the scene where we did with the flying car. And then they would cut in,
Right.
things from the thing. So it was shot with 35 millimeter inserts, but it was done on a live performance at Disneyland, and it was done on video. And basically, at that point in time, nobody knows if anybody made a kinescope recording of it
Hmm.
that would have preserved it. So I went and I found out about the show. Well, Disneyland, the studio had next to nothing on it because from their point of view, it was a Disneyland production. Luckily, Robert Tiemens, the assistant archivist at the time, found a set of beautiful leather-bound books down at Disneyland. Every episode that listed everything you could want to know: the scripts, how much they paid Fred McMurray for his mileage, what he had for lunch that day. I
Wow.
mean, everything. So I was able to and they had lots of still photos that they had taken. So I was able to reconstruct all the episodes from the scripts and from the still photos.
Yeah.
But I wrote to the TV stations. I wrote to the production company that they had rented the TV equipment from. I wrote to every sponsor that appeared on the show. And all we found so far is about a 30-second audio clip that somebody, for some reason, had on tape that they erased the rest of the tape. But there's, 30 seconds of them talking about, wow, meet me at Disneyland. This is so much fun to be here. I can't. And it stops. We also found, when I first got to Disney, being a World's Fair fan, I went to see all their files on the World's Fair, and they had
Yeah.
next to nothing.
Yeah.
And that's because it was organized by the studio, built by WED, operated by Disneyland, and then after the fair, everybody figured somebody else kept all that. So now again with space, I don't have a lot of space. I'll throw it out. The guys at Disneyland, they'll have it. The guys at WED, they'll have it. So when I first asked Dave Smith to bring me the World's Fair files, it was about 12 pages of stuff.
Wow.
So that's why when they were going to do the movie Tomorrowland, Disney had nothing, and they came to me and said, "Could you
Wow.
help us recreate the World's Fair? Do you have maps and blueprints and pictures and all the rest of it?" That's how I heavily got involved in that. Overall, though, Disney has the most complete archives of any of the studios in town. They have
Yeah.
saved more stuff than anybody else.
Yeah.
They have I don't think there's any TV shows or anything that have gotten lost,
Yeah.
over time, other than Meet Me at Disneyland.
Yeah.
They did Kodak 59, where they first go and unveil the Matterhorn and all that stuff. That was
Hmm.
thought lost, and they found a copy of that back at Eastman Kodak. So we keep looking for stuff that is
Yeah.
not immediately available. But they,
The,
for example, they did a whole thing when they did the Happiest Millionaire, Walt's last live action movie.
yeah.
They were doing a live action TV show where, they just happen to meet people and do that sort of thing. And they shot a whole bunch of it because we've got the stills and what you call it, the scripts and everything, but nobody can find any footage, because again, production's canceled, throw
Yeah.
it out, we don't need it.
The one that comes to my mind, which is the theatrical, is just they reconstructing bed knobs and broomsticks. You
Mhm.
would think that all the clips that were cut would have been saved because Disney saves everything apparently, but I guess not.
Well,
So that's
yes
the
and
one I
no.
remember. Yeah.
Sometimes, like Scott McQueen was the film archivist for years, and he would find things in a can that would be labeled, Mr. Mouth Goes to Town or something, or and he'd open up and it'd be bed knobs and broomsticks. It means things
Hmm.
that get stuck in the wrong can.
Hmm.
So they reconstructed a whole sequence out of The Happiest Millionaire. At the very end of the movie, Fred MacMurray and Greer Garson are singing "It Won't Be Long to Christmas."
Right.
My friend Stacia Martin had found the elements because she's a huge fan of the film. We were doing a anniversary briefing of the Happiest Millionaire, which we showed at the Disney Theater, and then we had like the Sherman Brothers and AJ Carruthers and everybody came back to my house for a big Happiest Millionaire party, which was great. But
Hmm.
Stacia found all this footage and everything. They put together the thing we did at the studio in the theater, and then what happened? They managed to lose it. So you're right with you. I'm getting pages. Dinner time.
Okay, we'll wrap
So
it up
they
here.
so they lost. We found that footage. They lost the footage. So when we did the movie again to come out, now they had to have, who's a real good Fred MacMurray impersonator? To
Right.
do some of that stuff. Same sort of thing they had to do in Bed Knobs and Broomsticks.
Right.
Who can do David Tomlinson or whatever. So
Roddy McDowell was one. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
So they
I
have
have to go
most
to
of it,
I have to
but
go to dinner too. So we'll call it quits here. But you're a fascinating guest. I should have you back at some point. And we'll talk again. But I want to thank you for being on the Fun Ideas podcast,
thank you.
and we'll promote your book one more time if you can find it. It's out of print, but it's a great book, "The Wonderful World of Disney Television: A Complete History" by Bill Cotter, and it's a big thick
Yeah,
book.
it just does. It was funny. Just on the side of it, real quick there,
Oh,
real quick. The book came out, and you see how big they put my name on the side of it. And
yeah.
I was at a event again with Robert Tiemens, the archivist, and everything, and he was giving he was saying stuff. When you come on the screen, I'm going to make fun of everything that you've said wrong in the screen. And Leonard Maltin was sitting in front of him and said, "Yeah, yeah, but Bill's in the show. You're not." So Robert, to this day, doesn't give me. He keeps swearing I paid people to put my name on the book in that big, big type. But if people do go to billcotter.com, I do have a bunch of other Disney stuff on there. Like you mentioned the Zorro stuff about the Golden Oak Ranch. But
Yeah.
I do have a section of all the appendices that got cut out of the book. I do offer on CD-ROM if people want to know all about all the canceled shows, all the merchandising, all the stuff. I think there's 13 appendices that fell on the proverbial cutting room floor. You can get through the website.
Okay. And quick question, then we'll let you go. Are you doing any personal appearances in the next few months or anything like that?
No, I just literally finished the last of them about a month ago. I do my own live talk every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock California time. And it's if you go to worldsfairphotos.com, which is one of my other websites, I'll talk about Zorro one week, Davy Crockett the next week. This week, I think I'm going to be, if all goes right, looking at amateur films from the 64, 65 World's Fair. So if people, and I do try to let people know where I'm going to be, what I'm going to be doing, that sort of stuff. But I literally just got home Saturday night from 3 weeks out of town. So I'm just hoping to stay home and be quiet for a couple of weeks.
That's fine.
But
Okay.
I
All
got
right.
a,
We'll leave it
yeah,
at that, and we'll both get some dinner. I thank you for being a guest, and this wraps it up for another Fun Ideas podcast.
great. And keep in touch about Gallagher, and I do want to get your books.
Okay. Thank you.
All
We'll
right.
talk soon.
Good talking to you.